I wanted to keep the introductions reasonably short. I wanted to sort of get into what this session's about. Again, it's a lot about hype versus reality. And I'm going to start sort of going with everybody, but starting with Nigel right here. And not everything is everybody, but what makes you roll your eyes? So you're out there on the floor. The people who are lying about being vendors here, are including myself, are throwing things at you. And just what tech discussions make your eyes roll? So there's robots, there's blockchain, there's AI,
Yep.
there's ordering, there's stuff.
Yeah, so what makes my eyes roll, not really a roll, but kind of grinds my gears, I guess would be the right term, is the evolution of kiosks. And with franchisees like KFC has, you have antiquated franchisees who have been in the system for a while. They have napkin deals with the kernel. So kiosks is looked at as a labor savings, which is really not true. If you looked at the way McDonald's deployed it, they actually have someone that's on that floor at any given time actually managing those guests to actually look to help them get through the kiosk process. So when I have franchisees say, oh, I want you to put in my restaurant so I can get rid of my front counter cashier, that's not going to happen, because you still need someone to actually go out into that lobby for the guest experience. We call it kerneling, actually having them clean up the tables, wipe down, also walk them through the kiosk process, because no one in our particular instance is just going to walk up to a kiosk with our demographic and just say, hey, I know how to use this exactly. And also the complexity of our menu doesn't allow that. So understanding that you can reallocate that labor to where you have them away from that front counter a little bit more to where they're doing other tasks. They have different secondary tasks.
So that drives you crazy. I'm going to get everybody else to get their eye rollers. We're coming back to kiosks. Somebody else jump in. Who else?
Frictionless checkout. That makes me roll my eyes as far as the hype versus reality. We hear a lot about Amazon Go and what they did a year or so ago. That seems to be the poster child for frictionless. Walk in, pick up what you want, walk out, and you're good to go. That is not as easy as it has been made out to be, and especially in a uncontrolled environment. There's a lot behind that people don't realize that doesn't get published. So for me, when I hear people talk about, it's got to be the next thing we have to do, it is a great idea, and it is something we are working on, yes, but it is not a very easy technology that just works like that.
Josh, Steven, thoughts?
I'd say they said both, probably what I said last year, and then also blockchain, but we're not going to talk about that. So I'd say over the last 12 months, what drives my gears the most is kind of like technology companies thinking that the food industry is so trivial. And so as somebody who's been on that side of the equation, had the empathy to sit with all the operators and understand that you can't just like throw technology at the problem. You kind of really have to understand what the problem is and then come from it the other way. So I think that's where I roll my eyes of like, you're not going to be able to just bring in this magic toy and suddenly every operator in the world is going to be like problem solved. Like literally every piece of technology is going to have this problem. And so what you have to do is work with the operators and work with everybody to build a better product. If you think you're going to put an iPad in a store and suddenly triple your revenue, it's just not the case.
It's change management.
Yeah.
Did everybody catch how the disruptor just basically said we were a year behind his
we'll catch up
You can
next
go
year.
through the records. I said kiosks are bad last year, but
You said they were stupid.
Freedom of
exactly what you
information
said.
next. Steven?
I honestly, I agree with Josh. I think that there's a marriage with tech coming in. Obviously, I mean, can't get away from it. That's why we're all here. But I think that from an operator standpoint, a piece of technology or a certain item isn't always going to fix my problem if you're not listening to what that problem is and working at it from how do we fix the problem with technology as opposed to technology being shiny objects. And I mean, to kind of go back to last year, everybody was talking about blockchain last year. I mean, the key presenter was on blockchain, and everybody was talking about blockchain and how it's going to revolutionize everything. And you hardly even hear it in major conversations now in terms of where it's at. I think there's certainly learnings from it, and it will continue to. I think people will try to figure out how it works on the loyalty program, and certainly from a food safety standpoint. But a year ago, you couldn't listen to a conversation here without hearing blockchain, and now it's kind of shiny objects lost its luster.
I'm going to stick with you. So we had a labor question here. And I'm not actually going to talk about the riffing on the minimum wage, but if you want to. But okay, so you go listen to to what's going on. It's a tight labor market. Cost of labor is going high.
Sure.
And the truth of the matter is, there's a need to automate somewhere. So what's the automation that is going to help best or that you think is intriguing in terms of supporting this labor issue? And if you want to riff on minimum wage at the same time,
sure.
that's fine.
I mean, labor is probably the largest headwinds we're facing right now operationally, and I think most people as operators in the room would agree. We started out the conference hearing nearly 1 million job openings and rising costs. I think that it's a balance. I mean, where I come from, people are always going to be first. My concept's designed around that. The way we look at our guests, the way we try to use data to look at people, it's all about people first. But it comes in with that problem of $15 an hour, and where do you find cost savings? So while the kiosk is a negative up here on the panel, in some regards, there is probably some learnings from that in how do we advance the kiosk operations, how do you use mobile ordering, how do you use third-party stuff to help that. In the back of the house, I think the proliferation and continued improvement with smart equipment, robotics, while I don't think a robot is never going to replace having anybody in the kitchen, I think that there's some remedial tasks that could potentially move to a robotic situation that starts to free people up. And then obviously the additional technology just frees people up from doing remedial tasks in general.
The people you don't have that are expensive. Nigel, do you want to weigh in from your perspective?
I'm not sure how the labor conversation is always just multifaceted, because honestly, in my perspective, it's people first, 100%, all the time, because something we say is the guest experience will never exceed that experience of the team member. So regardless of what that minimum wage amount is, regardless of what you need to pay them, what those tasks are doing, you have to make sure that they're having fun inside your restaurant. So that's something that we're striving to do, is how do you change that culture inside of a restaurant to where they might not, even if $15 an hour is out of the conversation, it's, can you pay them 10, can you pay them 11? They're willing to stay for a brand that has a culture in which they're willing to, that has a family environment, they want to be there. So that's really what we're striving for. We're not thinking about the $15 an hour. If it happens, it happens. There's nothing that we can do about it. But what we can do is make sure that there is a culture fit for our team members, that they want to be there inside those restaurants.
I'm going to go to Michael on a different question, unless you guys want to jump in. But so Michael, so a lot of people are restaurants, but let's talk grocery, because this is going to get to a restaurant moment in a second. So we're hearing convenient pickup and delivery. And there's a cool van out there, there are great apps, and I want to make fun of it. A lot of those solutions are kind of impressive. From your perspective, where do you see to read my question here, again, robots, drones, self-driving cars, et cetera. Talk about the last mile issue in terms of getting what you need, and bring a grocery perspective in if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, we've done all of that, to be honest with you. We've looked at drones, we've looked at robots. We have invested with, some of you may have seen or heard something about Nero and what we're doing. We've tested it in Arizona. We're actually testing it in Houston right now, driverless cars, delivering. One of the most successful programs that we've implemented in the last 5 years was our Click List program, where folks can go online, order, schedule a time, come to the store, and we'll pick the order for them and then bring it out to the car so they don't have to come in. That's gone over great. So we are open to trying whatever it takes, to get people what they want, how they want it. I think is our approach these days, is to not force a solution on them, but to be able to provide any and all options that they can to make the customer happy with the way they're doing it.
So you see that as a big customer satisfaction?
Oh, absolutely.
I'll call it kind of front of the house need. Nigel, so you're in a franchise space. I'm going to probably hit all of you on this question. So third-party delivery, we're going to hear a different story, I think, from the smaller chain. So third-party delivery in a franchise world, or automation in terms of getting people their orders?
So with third-party aggregation, with 4,100 restaurants, it's kind of difficult because where I live in Sherworsville, which is south of Louisville, you can get Grubhub, but it's solely pickup. So we're missing on the facts that a lot of these restaurants can't actually get these products that we're pitching to them because they're not in that 3 mile to 5 mile range to where our food quality is actually effective for us. So it's a difficult conversation because also we have our exclusive deal with Grubhub, but also you have these other 5 to 10 other aggregators that are out there that are still walking into your restaurant and interrupting your day because they're walking in as guests and thinking that they have some type of privilege that they actually don't. They're actually just guests. So they walk in just as they normally would and they would take out that. So it's different just because we have so many restaurants and the game we're trying to play in is not for everybody because we can't get to every person and every customer, every guest.
Right, but there is a trend to, ghost kitchens, we're not going to go deep into it. There's a trend for bigger brands to maybe use ghost kitchens, et cetera, to deal with the delivery side of the world and allow the bricks and mortar franchise retailers to handle that. You see that as a thing for big players like yourselves?
I do see it as a thing. KFC particularly hasn't gotten into it yet, but you see Chick-fil-A doing it with their catering offers. So they're siloing out just having catering and their delivery aspects out of one brick and mortar. There's no guest facing. You just have it there, and they do all their catering out of it, and all their delivery drivers come and pick up from there. So it actually takes that sales away from those other restaurants, but you also don't have to have the convenience of not having someone come into your restaurant and interrupting your operations. So
if I'm out here in the audience, I'm sort of a vendor type, I'm hearing from the bigger players, kind of reality, not that much hype. That investment's going to be really coming. Josh, you do a lot of consulting,
right?
And a lot of it has to do with the customer experience and who comes and who returns. And if we could keep it on the sort of last mile, the delivery, that experience before I go and ask, same of Stephen.
Yeah, I think with in the space as a whole, I've always viewed third party as like a game that the restaurants are playing a game of chess without any dice, right? That doesn't make any sense, but that's the entire thing is the third party delivery people are playing a different game than we think that's happening. And everybody will talk about that. So I won't get into that piece. But what I mean by that is we're losing the ability to track and understand our customers, their retention, blah, 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 that's very valuable. What's the LTV? Now, where I'm going to turn this and say, for the ghost kitchens, what makes it so difficult is that food is a very emotionally connecting thing. And so you like to experience it in person. You like to make sure that the food makes sense. You want to have heard of the brand. If you've ever run a direct-to-consumer business, you will understand advertising for a direct-to-consumer is far more expensive than having a brick and mortar on the side of a corner, call it Joe's, and people walk by and that's what they purchase. So I think the ghost kitchens struggle to acquire customers because DTC marketing is so expensive. It is far more expensive than having somebody walk by your place and say, I'm going to eat here, yum, this is great, now I want to order it in a separate way. So I think there's a different game that's being played, and all of the restaurants are well, where are the dice? And they're actually playing chess. So I think that's an interesting piece.
Okay, Stephen, you're smaller, and there's a million players out there that are going to deliver for you. Talk about it.
So we're a smaller upstart. We're 7 units. So we went down to the crossroads and sold our soul several years ago, and we have I look like I'm playing gin rummy with a number of third-party delivery people I have. And it's both good and bad. As a smaller upstart company, you're trying to establish your brand, you're trying to establish brand recognition, you're moving into new markets with zero to little brand recognition. You're looking at every possible avenue to build top line sales. The unfortunate thing is, the back end doesn't always feel as good as the front end. So we continue to look at how do you, once you've established that business, how do you migrate that business over into native app, your own delivery system. As you grow, working on partnerships with a third party, I don't have the leverage of 4,100 stores. I have 7, so it's obviously a little bit of a challenge. On the ghost kitchen side, it's certainly probably more talked about in our space than third party because we're just now kind of accepting that we're there and we just have to kind of navigate through it. But The ghost kitchen potential is supply and demand. So do you do like Chick-fil-A, which I wish I had $4.2 million average unit volume and I could afford to do my own. So now you're looking at like Kitchen United, and you had Cloud Kitchen out in LA with Travis Kalanick for a while. But then again, you have to start looking at what your economics are. So obviously you're going to have very little on the front end on CapEx space, but because of the proliferation of the demand side, those monthly rent structures that made it look very appealing for you to do that cloud kitchen piece now is now, when you start to do those performas, does it really balance out, and does it really make sense, and not just doing, to Josh's point, just doing a brick and mortar and getting that emotional connection and that.
So what do you want the third party? So they control a lot of their destiny. What do you want those third parties to do for you at this point? Just short, like
cut their delivery fee by 20%.
There you go.
I think for me, it's more like making them the logistics partner that everybody thinks that they are. Everybody is like let's just, if we go through like a quick history of third-party delivery, they're like, oh, here's an iPad, and you're like, oh, okay, what's this? You just put it in your restaurant and people make orders. Cool, yeah, sure. Wow, I already have one of these. yeah, but you want another one, right? Because that was very difficult. They didn't want to integrate with point of sales, and eventually you were like, well, can't they be the same thing? And then somebody else showed up with another iPad, and you're like, here's 2 iPads. More iPads, the better. More money, right? So like everybody's like, yeah, sure, so many.
We call it tablet hell.
Yeah. So then people were like, well, let's now go through the point of sale. Like, let's have it all directly ingest. Meanwhile, we're like, okay, cool. Remember that like customer conversation we had where you're gonna like tell me who's actually coming and like how often they come? Yeah, we'll get there. Here's another iPad, right? So like that became this. We're still in that narrative, right? You think if you call up anybody today, and they're probably in the audience, so don't yell at me, but like you'd be like, hey, I'd like to know how often Josh Patches is ordered from my restaurant. They'd be like, yeah, like we'll get to that. Right? GDPR, we can't tell you actually, right? So they're using a lot of these things as shields to share this information. And that, I think down the road, we're going to see that become a huge collision when somebody like Gusto tries to reacclaim that customer.
Right.
That's going to be they're going to have that as leverage because they're going to say, well, if you don't use one of our iPads, you're not going to get that guy back. He's not going to come. And so I think, and even measuring that as a data company is very difficult to understand. Even if it goes through your point of sale, they're not giving me that person's email address. What they're giving me is like, yes, Josh, like a person named Josh showed up. Oh, great.
So I'm going to interrupt you because I'm just going to go to a question I wasn't going to ask next because we'll just stay on this. So, okay, there's a lot of promises about, we're going to know who's coming, when they're coming, what they're ordering, and it's going to go all the way back and figure out our inventory and we'll predict even our scheduling. So, okay, let's not make fun of that because that's real. People want that. So how are you telling, others, including Kava, who we used to work with, how to collect that data? Let's say it's not here yet. How are you telling them to collect that data? Then I'm going to ask a couple of, how do you acquire the data that you need to do what you were just talking about?
It depends on what you do. So for some people, I think what blows my mind the most is I deal with some people who own their entire supply chain. So they make the food at a commissary off-site, and they're making mass volumes of food, and then they're bringing it to a location where they're going to prep it and sell it that day. This is a CPG side. This is all your manufacturing. This is Sage X3. This is an entirely different box of window here. That doesn't actually speak to the inventory, the back of house systems, to the point of sale, and they own their entire chain. They own from getting the inventory that, if to use the Kava example, like chickpeas, or they have all the information, but there's such a gap between people who can actually pass that information through that to me is so surprising that you wind up having to create some duct tape and some SQL queries and all this like weird math just to get the data from point A to point B. And that's what we suggest is like make sure that your actual back of house inventory system knows what's being delivered, and not everybody does that. I think that's what always surprises me the most is if you don't own your entire chain, that makes sense, right? You're at the mercy of your vendor who's going to send you an EDI, and they're going to say like, yep, we delivered what we said we were going to deliver, but when you're actually in control of that your entire self, we can't even get that solved yet, and that surprises me.
So what's crawl? I mean, what I'm really trying to ask for the people here is everybody's making this promise, so there's crawl, walk, run, so what's step one to collecting the data? Then I'm going to go to a couple of
make things simple. So like don't get complex, work on something small, work on one task, one item, and make sure you can follow it through your chain. And whether, I think what really is helpful is today you're doing it through a manual process. There's a human, they're probably doing it. Understand how to make that person's job easier and quicker using technology. And that might be spreadsheets, that might be something like a little easier than that, but digitizing that person's job and then figure out how to automate it.
Okay, so Kroger has a big inventory out there, and they really have to know who's coming, who's going, and a lot of stuff, if it doesn't sell, it dies. So, again, it's not quite ordering, but like collecting data for your operation so you can do this.
There are so many ways to go about doing that. You could go, for us, a lot of it started with our loyalty program, really identifying the customer, being able to track what their shopping habits are, and then over the years being able to consolidate that down, analyze that, and use that information to help better identify what products we should be supplying. You can also look just at point of sale. You can do things like IoT, start monitoring and measuring video analytics. There are so many ways to start collecting data. Just start collecting the data and then figure out how you're going to analyze it. That's the next step. But if you're looking for how do I get started, there's a number of ways to do it, but you got to start by getting something.
Right. So Kroger put in IoT just to collect basic food conditions. It's put in video just to see where people are and standing and what's empty in an aisle.
Exactly.
And I think, to your point, Josh, I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm just sort of repeating what I heard. Start somewhere in one way and do that. Nigel, do you have anything to add? Oh, go ahead, Josh.
So like here would be a good example. So Kroger, probably the average checkout time, more than 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. You're sitting there doing absolutely nothing.
29 seconds.
29 seconds. I think that's pretty fast. How many here have checked out in 29 seconds? Exactly. If I'm getting a piece of gum, it's 29 seconds. But no, the point I'm making here is even 29 seconds is probably faster than most, is actually slower than most QSR places. So I don't mind giving over my card, right? I'm looking through the People magazine. I'm trying to figure out what the Queen's up to. Here's my loyalty card. For QSR, you have the opposite problem. Get me out of here. I have lunch. I have 30 minutes to get from point A to point B. That loyalty card is now a friction point. So turn that on its head. How do I make that an enjoyable experience for the customer? How do I make that fun? How do I make that rewarding? How do I get that information from you without causing a friction point, right? I don't want to have to tell you my phone number. I don't want to have to. And you see a lot of loyalty providers do that. But I just wanted to make that point of like different use cases of different problems, but think about the customer's perspective of 29 seconds versus 15 seconds.
So I'm going to, just one more on this because I think it's, so collecting the data for franchisees are hearing this stuff. Mm-hmm. How are you collecting the data for them, or not how, or like, what do you think is, how to start doing this right?
I think a lot of times we have the same pain point that Josh was actually speaking about. It's like we own all our data through the whole supply chain, but there is a gap between when we're talking about from a restaurant industry, from our inventory, so our like McLean, PFG, Hickory and things like that, to our actual cloud-based big data platform. So they have all this data, whether it's blockchain, whether it's barcodes, wherever it might be, but they're not able to feed us the right amount of data or the data in that, like the schema that we need to actually utilize it in our back of house systems. So now we're going through projects of like forecasting what does an actual automated inventory order look like, and we have to go back to square one to figure out, hey, what data are you actually feeding us? You have all this in your back, you have all this in your back of house, you have all this in your data systems, but you can't actually feed us what we need. So it's going back to square one where we're not even crawling anymore. We're still trying to be born. So that's where, and franchisees, they have the ability to pull, push, whatever data they want. So we own the data from a corporate perspective, but if they want to send the data to SMG for a different VOC platform or a delegate, they can do that.
Okay, so you're offering them their data so they can use others as a service. So I'm going to go to...
Before we leave,
okay.
Point of clarification, and it's actually valuable to the conversation. I'm going to sound like I'm defending myself, but...
I love it.
It is 29 seconds.
That's certainly not happening.
It is 29
not happening.
Ordered $5 or less.
Being defensive.
No, not at all.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. But it's a very good success story that we had internally about collecting data and utilizing that, because our average wait time used to be over 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And 29 seconds is not necessarily the time it takes you to check out. It's the amount of time on average that people wait in line, because we started monitoring everybody coming in. We built a very complicated system that has a nice algorithm in the back end to identify the time of day and all those good variables. And we use that to, in real time, alert the front end. how many check lanes they should have open at any given time. So we optimize the labor at the front end, but we're also able to reduce that wait time in line. So but goes back to the heart of the problem, or the core of the question, which is start analyzing, start gathering data so that you can do something with it. It was actually a very successful story in our
Yeah, it sounds intimidating. I think it's the keep it simple stew part. See, stew, get it? Yeah. Is it only me?
Yeah.
I know, I need intervention.
You can't
spell. Okay. All right, I'm going to come back to Stephen because I know this is great. So kiosks. So the big players are looking at the McDonald's, et cetera, in a way that it might be a necessary evil, but and we don't have to have a big kiosk thing because there's been some eye rolling, but there are some actually pretty impressive kiosk guys out there on the floor. Talk about kiosks.
Well, yeah, I'm not discounting kiosks, and I think that it's going to be an element in fast casual and QSR, and it will potentially move into full service type situations. I mean, for us, we're still kind of going back to that people first and that engagement, and again, trying to analyze with all the data that you can have and who your demographics are in that age group, and you look at this point, we kind of see we span over a large age group in terms of our guests, and so you have the younger kids who don't want to talk to anybody, like my daughter, and they want to go in and they want to have their experience by themselves and get in and get out. And then you have my demographic who like to talk to people and have that interchange. And so I think that some of the advantages of the kiosk piece still needs to be vetted out. We all thought it was going to be this big labor saving person. You take away the you take away a cash register operator, but you're pulling them back out with a floor management or somebody to shepherd you through how to use the kiosk. I think there's some people who, I had talking about this coming down here, our marketing person was like, I don't want to touch the screen after somebody else put their screens on there because it's like, did they just sneeze? Did they just do whatever? It's disgusting. Like I'm gonna get sick from using the kiosk. So I think it's still got to work out. I mean, I don't think that it's I don't think it's going to die on the vine. I just think we still have to figure it out.
Figure out if the ROI is there.
And see, and like you said, I mean, McDonald's has put it in, and you certainly see a larger check average on kiosk. I mean, it's proven data, which you automatically have the cue on upselling that you don't always get in the human element of reminding your staff on how to queue things up. And I've had people tell me they're more willing to upsize and supersize and get the ice cream because they're not looking at somebody with concern of judgment when they're ordering. But
order shaming.
Yeah, the order shaming piece. But so I mean that's something that I think is certainly there. But in my opinion, right now, I think we still got to figure it out and how that element is going to be there on the customer facing side.
So Nigel, I cut you off on kiosks. You were giving a good discussion of your eye roll. So
it's
else?
Done. I'm done with it.
You're done?
No, it's one of those. It depends. Just exactly like you said, the demographic. But also, when you look at a restaurant that has like a 60-day return rate of their guests, how do you actually have a guest go to a kiosk who don't even know your menu? Right. They were just there 60 days ago, and your LTO items might have changed since then. The schema of your kiosk might have changed since then. And talking about McDonald's has succeeded in kiosks, especially overseas in the UK, because they have them everywhere, but also they don't have a drive-through. So when you're actually pushing people to use the kiosk, they have to use the kiosk or they have to go to that one person that's at the front counter. So you're driving them to do something that's actually more beneficial to them because they're not having to wait in line. So I think kiosks will eventually succeed, but currently the way the demographics of like KFC is just not the ideal sense in most restaurants, just like Grubhub and delivery.
Right, so I want to leave some time for questions, but we have another 5 or so minutes, so I'm going to do something quick. So a couple things quick. One, voice. Okay, so there's somebody out there, Novo Labs is out there. They're sort of using voice and AI really to handle the ordering side and make that watch this, frictionless. But then there's also the use of, OK Google and Alexa in the back of the house to help people understand what the heck's going on. Anybody who wants to jump in on voice first in this crowd? Anybody want to talk about voice? Is it coming? I'm trying to be a little bit out in the future on this one.
I can't get this guy to use a kiosk. You want me to put an OK Google back there?
Yeah.
No, I think yeah, exactly.
I'm not your demographic.
Am I? Are you not?
Well, he says he's voice, so
I'm
he's
a
actually going to
disruptor,
call.
so
Yeah.
So go ahead, Josh. Go.
You go. No.
I don't know. I think like they're right now they're very flashy and they're very very rudimentary and very cool. Like, give me my sales number. Like, cool. Yeah, let's move on. I could have checked my phone. I think where they're really become useful is I think if you look at the Google Next Hub Max, where it's both sound and video, I think that'll be pretty good. I think you're gonna need to layer in some video there. But I'm not convinced. I'm very early on it. I'm not convinced of it, but I'm not against it. I just need to really see how it plays out because I don't see what need it's solving today. I think on the customer ordering side, it can be a bit clunky if you don't navigate your menu accordingly. Because I was on a big voice project for a while, and a lot of it has to be can we repeat things to you instead of reading it right if your eyes are always down? Can you understand what the order was? When a customer's ordering, can you navigate it in the right way so it speeds it up? So I think it's early. It's too early for me to say yes or no, I think.
Stephen, I interrupted you.
No, I mean, I look at the voice stuff more in the back of the house and the employee experience, the training aspect of it. I mean, KFC has obviously put it in place and in some training aspects. I know they tested it. I don't know how it plays out in the front of the house. I do think from a delivery standpoint, I mean, obviously, people are very prone right now to order paper towel, Alexa, order paper towels for tomorrow. So, do we get to the point where it's, Alexa order Gusto?
But you see a back of the house event.
But I think more in the back of the house. I mean, when I look at trying to solve problems, going back to the labor piece earlier on, using technology to solve problems is employee retention. How do I keep them engaged? How do I train them in a way that they're used to? And if you're not staying on trend in terms of, just if you consider our education system right now, our almost entire education system is now in Google Classroom. My kids have they have no textbooks, so they're learning through Google Classroom. They're learning through voice-activated stuff. They're used to their tablets and laptops. So. How do I work toward making sure that I engage this next group of employees as they're coming up and how they've learned? So if they've spent 12 or 16 years in education and not done off of textbook stuff, I want to make sure that that's where we're at. So I see it more in the back of the house.
Anything you want to add?
I completely agree with Steve, and that's what we've been testing primarily in our warehouses, not so much in our stores. But
I'm going to do 2 quick questions, and I want to make sure there's some time for everybody out there or some of you to answer questions. So I'm going to start off with Nigel. How do you make a tech implementation decision and implementation successful? Your view, just like a couple rules of the road that you want to share. We can just go quick on this one.
So I had a mentor tell me about the Collar change management process. So one of the key pieces of there is create a coalition and excitement to actually have change management go through. So a coalition as in I would get franchisees, RGMs to give me feedback about, hey, what do you think about this technology platform? What do you think about putting this inside the restaurant? So at the front end of this whole project, I have a team with me that says, yes, we aligned to doing this. I got their feedback. We want to do this, this, and this. And also they help you build business requirements off the bat. So, and then you get the team excited inside of a restaurant. So that's one thing I've been trying to drive at KFC is how do you make these teams excited about doing training job aids when they know how to build a chicken sandwich, but how do you make it exciting? It's going to come around every 3 months. So how do you build that excitement? How do you build these change processes to where if it's a KDS system that's brand new, how do you make it fun to them to actually say, oh yeah, I really want to use this. I really want to watch my job aids, my training videos, or whatever it might be on these platforms. So it's also meeting them where they're at today. And that's what you hear a lot.
So focused on that. Anybody else want to jump in on how to make it successful?
how to make it successful, maybe not that so much, but just don't be afraid to try. One of my favorite things about Kroger over the last 10 years, there was definitely a shift in leadership, and they kind of got past that point of saying we need to overanalyze everything and make sure, our profit margins are very, very small in grocery. So there's a fear of investing and trying stuff that may fail. But about 10 years ago, we had a change of heart, and again, now it's just kind of like, yeah, go ahead, give it a whirl. Don't
get all the ROI figured out ahead of time, kind of stuff.
Yep. Just go try.
All right, last question, and then we'll answer some just company brand out there that you're looking at that you're impressed with, or that everybody should be impressed with, or is changing your way of thinking. We'll start at the far end, come here, and then we'll open it up.
Two big companies, the Premier League, so the English Premier League, the way that this is crazy, right? Not restaurants, but the way that they analyze data, the way that they're solving problems. They have an old school approach. They have people who don't want to really change. How do they have a non-stagnant game, so they're trying to figure out how to collect data that way. And then the second one is Formula One. So Formula One actually collects about 10 terabytes of data per car per race. And so that's an insane amount of data. If you can understand how big that is, it's probably like your iTunes times 1,000,000. And so what are they collecting up? How are they analyzing it? How are they getting it back to the crew and everything like that? So I try not to look inside the restaurant space for inspiration, not because we're not all great, amazing people trying to make the world better, but because I'm trying to do it from another perspective of people who've solved it in different ways. So those are two of the biggest companies.
So we only got a couple minutes, so others quickly?
I live, breathe the restaurant space. So Sweetgreens, obviously, aspirational, and I'm a huge fan and really look at Shake Shack, their people first philosophy.
Sure. Nigel?
Mine's a given. From a chicken QSR, it's got to be Chick-fil-A.
Popeyes? Oh, sorry.
Popeyes not in here, they're trash.
It's good chicken.
But no, like you said, it's people first. They started with that mentality and never strayed away from it.
Okay, Michael, last word.
Amazon, got to respect them. Hate what they did with Whole Foods, and didn't help our company a lot, but love what they do. They're not afraid, and yeah.
So we probably have time for one question, but people will be hanging out afterwards. Anybody got a question? I'm shocked.
So I wonder if you guys can talk a little bit about just a sentence or two about ecosystems. I read one about Kroger partnering with TerraCycle Waste Management maybe, and doing Loop. So it was the glass and metal packaging for delivery, so you have reusable packaging and things like that. Sort of just the end-to-end creative stuff you're seeing in terms of evolving ecosystem, API, other integration to get at data or to get at customer base.
I think we could talk for an entire 45 more minutes on that, but I think it's key. I think having an ecosystem, regardless of what you're doing, buying something more than just a point solution is 100% what we're into. It's got to be something you can expand, extend, grow, start small, but let it be something you can build on.
All right, we're out of time, but we're going to hang out. So if you have individual questions or you want to get at some other stuff, just come up and talk to these guys. Everybody, thank you so much. Very much appreciate it.